do a little project here which is perfect for a Christmas gift card. And I've collected all the materials that I need to do this project right here. And I'm going to do a little painting of some mistletoe, and I'm going to show you how I tear the paper and make the decal edge for the card. I've got a card ready prepared, and what I've done is I've deckled a piece of purple sparkly paper and adhered it to the card here. I'll just put the envelope out the way there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure a piece of painting paper to go within that square. So what I do is usually quite a quick little cheat really, is I've already deckled one corner and I'm just going to place it onto the card like so. And just mark about 1 centimetre in on each corner here, just so that the paper is a little bit smaller than the purple paper. And then using a set square, I'm just going to mark up the straight edge. Just line it up, just mark it very lightly and put that away now. And then using my decal edged ruler, I've got two edges here. I've got a very rough edge and a slightly less rough edge, and I'm going to use the slightly less rough edge. What I'm going to do is just put the card there for a minute, and if you put your weight fully onto the ruler like so, and then take the excess and pull it against the ruler like so. I'll just tear to there because I don't want to tear the whole sheet up. And then I turn it round. Oh, let's do it that way. I can do it this way. And then just putting my weight down onto that piece of card there and just pull that bit. Just get rid of that piece of paper. And there you have a nice little deckled edge around your painting paper. And that will sit on top of the card like so. So now we're going to paint our painting onto this little piece of paper. I always cut it first because if I paint it first it's always too big or the wrong angle, so it's always nice to know exactly how big the piece of paper needs to be. I bought some mistletoe, and what I've done is I've taken the berries from one part and the leaves from another because I couldn't find the perfect bit for the card and I wanted it to be very obvious what it was. So I'm just going to lay those two next to one another and start the drawing. Right, I've done a little drawing here, and what I've done is I've combined the two parts of the plant to make one little sprig, and I've put it at an angle because it's rather nice to have this little jaunty angle. So that's the first stage, just a very simple pencil outline. You don't need to put any detail on, just a very nice clean outline. And then what I'll do is I'll just very gently remove any lines that I don't want with the eraser. I've drawn it very lightly so there's not too much to lose. Just clean that away. And now we'll go on to our, and by the way I used a 2H for that because I just want a very light pencil line for that. And I've just done one single line for the stem so that I don't make the stem too wide. Okay, so now we're going to do the colour mixing. I'm going to mix up a very dull green because it is quite a sort of earthy green here. This is a big bunch of mistletoe that we bought from a shop, from a garden centre, and it's a little bit old so the colours are a little bit muted, but that's actually quite nice. So I'm going to start with French ultramarine, nice big puddle of that. And then I'm going to use Sennelier yellow, and that's the nice dark green already started. And then just keep that as your main puddle, and then we'll take a little bit out to the side, a little satellite puddle, and add some lemon, Sennelier lemon. It's rather nice. We'll start with the leaves and then we'll go on to the berries in a moment. I think that's okay. What I might do is take another little satellite puddle just in case for the slightly bluer parts and add some phthalocyanine blue, phthalo blue as I call it, just to have some brighter green there, just in case we need that. Now I'm going to use a number 4 today because it's quite a small plant, small brush. Just wake my brush up. I'm going to lay the leaf in a similar angle to the drawing, and away we go. What I like to do first is just test the colour out next to the leaf. So I'm going to put a little bit of the main colour onto the corner of a piece of paper here and just offer it up next to the leaf. That looks pretty good, so I'm quite happy to go on with that. Our first stage is always the water. So I'm going to put some water onto the leaf. The nice thing about doing a little card like this for a friend is that it doesn't have to be perfect, I don't think, you know, it's going to have a little bit of character. So they'll be so thrilled to get something that's hand painted anyway. What I do is I put the water on and then mop up the excess. Pick up that lovely dull green. Sounds like a contradiction, but dull can be pretty too. And I'm just going to run that down the darker side of the petal, the leaf rather. A nice little sweep down there. And then I'm going for my more lemony mix on the other side where it's catching the light. Really nice shaped leaves these are. There's a little bit of a puddle at the bottom there, but don't worry about that. Just get everything nice and smooth. When you get to the berry, make sure that you take a nice little sharp angle around there so you keep a nice round berry. And then cleaning all the water out of the brush, mop away that puddle. Okay, so that's what you're after, a nice little smooth leaf there. And now we're going to do the same on the other side. This one's slightly more yellowy, so just before I do that, I'm just going to grab a little bit more of the Snellier yellow and mix it into the lemony puddle, just to make it a bit more yellow in colour. So again, on with the water. This one's got a little twist to it, so I'm just going to do the top part of the petal and then the underneath that you can see on the next glaze. And I'm picking up that lovely, it's almost like an olive green here. I'm going to put that very gently along there on the underside there. No, it's not the underside, it's the top side, but it's the bottom edge. And then I'm going back to my original dark green for the top edge that's slightly in shadow. Clean your brush, take all the water out of it, and then very gently just mop away that little bit of puddle at the base. Now while that's been being painted, this one's actually settled and it's just about to dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just flick out some of those little veins that I do. Just run the tip of a clean damp brush through the settling glaze. And you can just about see here, it's just pushing a little channel through, which is rather nice. So I'm just going to do that again, just alongside. You only need the last hair of the brush, and it should be just enough just to push a little channel through. And there's some little indications of some very fine veins coming off that, which I can just see, little loops of them. So I'm just going to indicate those as well, very gently. So this is the tip of a clean, damp brush, just to get some of those little veins through. And while I've been doing that one, this one's almost at the nice stage for doing the same. So I'm just going to run that tip of that damp brush through there. Hopefully you can see this well, and then you can have a go yourself. And I'm also going to just tidy the edge here while I'm in the area, just a little bit of a shabby edge here and there. And then just one or two of these little veins coming across. I'm being a little bit vague because they're not that prominent, so I don't want them to be too prominent on the picture either. Okay, so we're going to let that dry, and then when that's dry we can start working on the underneath of the leaves and the stalk. The leaves are dry now, so what I'm going to do is remove the pencil around the edge of the leaves. It's always good to get rid of the pencil as soon as you can. That way you don't make it permanent. And then what we're going to do now is paint the underneath of that leaf and the stem. Still working with my number 4. I'm going to put a little bit of water, just put a tiny bit of water alongside the line of the stem. And the stem's quite limey, so I'm going to use the pale green. And I'm going to run that very carefully and create the width of the stem as I go. I've made it a little bit longer and given it a very, very gentle curve to make it more painterly, finishing it about there. And then I clean my brush, take all the water out and just run the tip of the brush through the middle just to reveal a little bit of light. I do that a couple of times actually. And then with a small amount of paint we're going to run, I'll just turn that round so I can run the underneath of the petal, leaf. That's something I always do, say petal instead of leaf and leaf instead of petal. Part of the problem of painting so many flowers. So what I'm going to do is put a little bit of that green in there for the top there, and then a little bit just underneath where it goes underneath the berry. And use the clean damp brush again just to mop out the puddle. Again, we don't put any detail on at this stage because we're just getting the background colour mapped in. And I'm going to, while that stem is drying, I'm going to mix up the colour for the berries, which to all intents and purposes are white berries, but of course if you put them against the white paper they're actually quite green, a sort of grey green. So I'm going to start mixing a grey, and I'm going to use a very light wash of French ultramarine, and then add to that a little bit of the Sennelier yellow. Oh, that's slightly too much, I'll just take some of that away. If that happens, don't try and mix up more colour, just get rid of some of the yellow. Just add a bit more blue. Add a very tiny touch of the Sennelier red. So there's my grey. If I just show you a little bit of that on the paper, just a sort of mid-grey. And then what I'm going to do is mix in some of my lime green to about half of that grey, and then a little bit of lemon. This is the Sennelier lemon at the top with a little bit of grey into it. So I've got two dirty greens really that are quite nice for these berries, and I'll just show you that on the paper. That's my dirty lemony green, and this is the grey green. Those two colours look like they would work well on those berries. Okay, so back with the number 4. With berries, it's all about keeping the highlight. So really study them first, have a look where the highlight is. And what we want to do is put the water on and put the colour around the highlight so that the water is very soft and moves in around the highlight. And put the water on. It's quite tricky because it's very small. And we'll just let that sit there for a minute. And then mop, so we don't have too much water. Then I'm going to pick up my colours. Start with the yellowy green. And just letting that drop onto the wet paper. I'm not really putting much on there at all because the water is moving it around. And then I'm going to take some of the grey and put that around that side. you'll find it'll just fall off the brush quite nicely. And then I'm going to mop this side just to keep this side where my light is. So keep drying the brush, cleaning the brush, drying the brush, and mop up so that all the colour doesn't sit on the area where the highlight is. Because it's such a tiny area, you'll find the colour just moves across really quickly, so you just have to do lots and lots of mopping just to keep the highlighted area clean. Once that's settling, you can drop in a little bit of the darker green down the bottom, just where it's meeting the stem. It's a nice little blush of darker green there. Using just the tip of the brush. It's very good for practicing your brush control. Now, while that one's drying, I'm going to quickly map in the other one. Slightly different position of the highlight's at the top here. And I'm just going to keep it just shy of the drying berry because I don't want them to bleed into one another. A little bit of water. Oh, I picked up the wrong green. Just grab some of that lighter green. And this time I'm going to put the light green right down here, across half of it, I think. And actually this one's more green than grey, so I'm going to put a little bit more grey into the green just to have a slight difference, and then drop that in there. You find you have to sort of push the paint into the area that you want it to dry into. I'm keeping my light on the top. Now I'm just going to use my brush as a mop and just mop out any colour that moves into my highlight area. Just a little mop like that, keep it out of the way. And then while that's settling, grab a little bit of my darker green. I'm just going to drop that here where it meets the stem. Nice if your berries are round, so try not to go over the edges and keep making them bigger each time, because you end up with enormous berries and you don't want that. So what I'm going to do is let that dry, and then we'll come back, get rid of all the pencil and start putting in some of the detail. I've waited for that to dry now. I'm just going to get rid of all of the pencil so that I haven't got any pencil to worry about. Hold it firm so that you don't get any creases in your paper. Sweep those off. So we're all ready to put the detail on now, and I'm going to use my number 4 again, and I'll just wing my way around all the greens that I've got. I'm using some of the original dark green here, and I'm going to put in some of the little junctions here to show how the berries are attached. Just a small amount of colour in there and a little bit in there. And then what I'm going to do is run a little bit of the darker green along the side of the stem away from the light, so we get a little bit more shadow. And then run a damp brush alongside that so you don't get a hard line. So on the softer side, on the highlight side, just run a brush along there. Then I'm using the brighter green, the one that I added the phthalo cyanine blue to, and I'm going to use that on the leaves. So just bring the leaf over here, put the berries up there, and I'm going to run a little bit of the colour between the veins, just to strengthen that green through there. And what you're doing is using a very small amount of paint just on the tip of the brush and running it down onto the dry paper, and then a little bit of water and soften it into the rest of the leaf so you get a little bit of a fold. And I'm going to add some brighter green to the other side where it's curling up. So a little bit of that yellowy green there. This goes over the lifted detail. It'll still shine through. A little bit of the blue-green at the top as well. So keep looking at the leaf. This is the secret to the good detail, is just to keep looking and observing. Just a little bit of softening there. Let that one rest for a minute and put a little bit of shadow underneath here. I'm going to turn the paper. It's always good that you can get right behind the line with the brush. A little bit of darkness under there. And soften that into the stem there because I want the light to carry on. Right, just a little bit of the dark green on the tip of this leaf here where it's curling over. Fill that in there and then lay the brush back like that just to catch the end and soften it into the leaf with some water. Right, back to the berries. I'm going to put a little top to the berry there. You can just see there's a little point to the top of it. I'm going to put that on. Even though I can't quite see it at my angle, I'm just going to put it on because it'll just give a nice little focus to the berry. So a little top to there. And I can see the one round the side here. You won't see it from where you are, but I can see the end there. And then going back to my little grey puddle, the first grey puddle that I mixed, just stir that up, wake it up. I'm going to put a little bit of shadow on between the two berries. A little shadow there. And a little shadow there. Where the two little berries kiss in the middle. And then I'm just going to soften the edge of the shadow so you don't get a hard line, just with a clean damp brush. And then using my brighter green, where it's all dried out, I want to just make it slightly greener down below. So I'm going to put this half with a green glaze again. And again, soften the edge. And a little bit of the grey green, the third colour that we mixed, on this side of this berry. The closer we get to the highlight, the softer it needs to be, so every time I put a little bit of colour on, I soften it with the paintbrush. Just make sure that when you soften any edges that your brush isn't too wet, because otherwise it'll deposit a whole load of water and then you'll be in a bit of a pickle. Now I'm going to put some bright green edging along here. I'm going to move that berry off for a minute and just get a nice clean edge on this leaf. What I'm doing is using a slightly fresher green and just running it very carefully along the edge of the leaf. And keep moving the bit of paper so that you can always see where the point of your brush is. The last little bit of detail that I'm going to put on there, again this is just a quick little project as a gift, so the little bit of detail that I'm putting on, you can leave it at this stage if you want, but I want to just get a little bit more sharpness here and there. I'm going to dry brush, so I'm going to use my brush and flatten it out between my fingertips like that, so you get the hairs all separated, and then find a little bit of the green that's quite dry. Just flatten the brush against the palette like so. And then just to build a little bit of texture up on the leaves, I'm just going to drag that very gently over the top of the painting. It's a little bit of texture over the top of the leaves. And do the same on this one. To give them that slightly crinkly effect, like they've had a hard time already. A little bit of quinacridone gold now, tiny little bit mixed onto the palette. And what we're going to do is just mark in a little bit of this golden colour at the base of the berries. You could use a little bit of dirty yellow or something like that. It doesn't have to be quinacridone gold, but it's quite a pretty colour, quinacridone gold, and it seems to shine off the page. So I'm just doing that here and there on the berries just to give them a little bit more interest. This is more artistic license than accuracy, I would have thought. A little bit more shadow just to get a bit more drama on this bottom one. And we're nearly at the point where we let it dry. Just catch those edges again. It's all about keeping an eye on drying puddles. And then while those berries are settling, I'm just going to put another little crease alongside the edge of the stem, and a couple of little creases, oh, a little bit of fluff on the brush there, a couple of little creases through the middle. And there we go. Just a little bit of tidying up when you see it. And if you're happy with that, then you leave that to dry, and then we can start talking about how we put it onto the card with some silver leaf. Everything's dry, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear the decks, get rid of all the mistletoe and the bits of spare paper, and I'm using a synthetic brush now and some gold size. It's actually silver leaf that we're using, but it's gold leaf size, and it's acrylic, so it's like a sort of bit like a Copydex or something like that to stick the size on. And the plan is to put a nice sort of bit of distressed silver leaf around it. I'm using a synthetic brush, as I said, and then what you do is you paint it where you want it, and I'm going to put it right up next to the leaf there, but then I'm going to leave it quite sort of rough elsewhere. And put a little bit there. This is entirely optional, you don't have to do this. I just had some size in the cupboard and thought, and some gold leaf, and thought, yeah, I'll put some of that onto this project for you. So I'm putting that across there and then through there, and you can put it up to the edge if you want, or short of the edge, it's entirely up to you. I'm going to put it close to the edge of that petal, leaf rather. Terrible. And then a little bit in there close to the berries, just in there. And what you do is you leave this for about 5 minutes. Keep an eye on it, because what you don't want it to do is dry out before you're ready to put the size on. And what you're looking for is a slightly sort of tacky look to it, tacky feel to it rather. So, you know, a bit like sellotape when you put your finger onto sellotape. So we'll just leave that to settle for a second, and I'll get the leaf. So this is silver leaf. It's been in the cupboard quite a long time, so it's a bit crackled, but I quite like that. It's given it a nice distressed look. And we'll just keep a little eye on it. It's really once it's gone from being shiny to slightly matte. And then I'm just going to put that over the whole picture. And I have here a little polished stone, and I'm just going to rub the silver leaf onto the painting and keep my fingers crossed that it works. I'm pressing quite hard, but I want it to look distressed. I don't want it to look perfect. I've only put this size in certain places. Just see how that's worked. Just a little bit more pressing down here. You can get this silver leaf from most good art shops. Don't use it on edible things. It's not edible leaf. What I'm going to do is just peel that back now. Oh, that's quite pretty. So I'm going to leave that to dry, and then when it's completely dry, just scrape off the bits that I don't need. So everything's dry now, and what I'm going to do is use a scalpel to remove any of the loose leaf, or the leaf, the silver leaf that's come onto the design, onto the painting, and just hold it very gently and just scratch away any of the silver that you don't want, and just turn that round and just remove it. I mean, you could leave it on if you were feeling daring, but I quite like it to just sit on top. And once you're happy with that, we're ready to put it onto the card. And I've got the card ready with the purple paper. And this is the point where you can turn it around and see which angle looks looks nicest, because what I want to do is get a sort of angle of it coming downhill, maybe, as though you were going to stand underneath it for a kiss. So I'm going to use Pritt stick and give that a good square of that, flip it over. Actually, I've changed my mind. I think I'm going to put it up the other way. I think that looks nicer. And just put it in the middle, but slightly deeper at the bottom. Just a little bit deeper at the bottom, because when it's standing up, it will appear as though it's the same width. And what you can do, which would be rather nice, would be a little signature down on the corner, just to show that it is hand painted.